Felicitous greetings, fellow Fanatics. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Adam the Fanatic, and today I'm going to be celebrating my channel's 1-year anniversary by taking a look at CrossCode by Radical Fish Games. For those of you that have followed my channel, it's probably no surprise that I'm finally taking a look at this one. It has a style of storytelling reminiscent of Arabian Nights, with themes that are evocative of both Tron and Oh, sorry about that. I'll get into that last one once we're into spoiler territory. For now, let's dive in and take a look at CrossCode. CrossCode is an action RPG where you'll take on the role of Leia, player within a virtual reality MMORPG known as Crossworlds. Leia has amnesia, and as someone that played the game previously, Sergei Asimov, who guides her through the game, is hoping that playing it again might act as a therapy of sorts and jog her memories. Now I know what you're thinking, VR MMOs and amnesic protagonists, this sounds like it's just setting up to be a collection of bad JRPG tropes. But one of the best things about CrossCode is how it takes these overused ideas and actually handles them in a mature fashion. Throughout the game, you'll occasionally hear NPCs talking about the world behind their screen, a world that is never explored in too much detail, but we do find out that space travel is at least fairly common, and players from all over the galaxy indulge in Crossworlds. And Crossworlds itself is very different from real-life MMOs. Instead of merely using a virtual world, much of the terrain is crafted like a theme park, actually built into the landscape, which players explore through their avatars made of what is known as instant matter. And I don't want to go into too much detail before the spoiler warning, but Leia's amnesia and the reasons behind it are a major theme of the game, being fully explored and explained before everything is over. Oh, and she's mute. Again, this isn't lazy writing. They're not hiding behind the pretense of letting the player immerse themselves. Leia is actually incapable of speech. Her speech module is damaged when she's brought into the game. Sergei does manage to partially get around this by manually encoding a few words Leia can speak, but she only has a handful of them by the game's end. But just like real speech, Leia's is supplemented by her expressions. Although all the art in this game looks amazing, Leia especially has painstaking work taken to make sure that she has a wide variety of expressions. She smiles and laughs, she frowns and cries, she shows smugness and confusion at times. Radical Fish made sure there was no shortage of emotions, with dozens of different sprites depicting her facial expressions. I repeat, Leia being mute is not lazy writing. It is fully acknowledged and explored within the game. And it's not just Leia's expressions that have care put into them. The entire game looks beautiful. Although the game uses a 16-bit aesthetic, there's no way this could ever run on the SNES, nor its contemporaries. Firstly, there are far more animation frames than could ever fit on any of those carts. And secondly, while it does use a retro aesthetic, it also uses a lot of particle effects to supplement it. And then, of course, we have those high-tier combat arts, which are absolutely a treat to watch go off. That seems as good a reason as any to transition into talking about combat. As an action RPG, combat is one of the game's major focal points. Taking in the role of a Spiromancer, Leia has two primary means of attack. A close-ranged attack, which can be chained into a 4-hit combo, which also has a bit of hit stun against weak enemies. You're also able to throw balls of energy known as virtual ricochet projectiles. You can fire a weak scatter shot by rapidly mashing the button, or you can hold down the button to take your time and aim precisely, not only increasing your accuracy and power, but also allowing the shot to bounce off of walls. You also have defensive options, allowing you to dash away from danger or to block enemy attacks. You'll take a bit of chip damage when you block, but if you activate your shield at just the last second, you'll not only take no damage from the attack, but also you'll often be able to stun melee attackers for a few moments, allowing you to follow up and return the assault with one of your own. As the game goes on, you'll gain access to 4 elements which you can use to augment your attacks. Certain enemies are of course resistant or weak to certain elements, but on top of that, your stats will change depending on which buffs you unlocked for the given element. Whenever you attack with an element, your overload meter will begin to slowly climb upwards. If it maxes out, you'll be forced back into a neutral state for a while, though you can also let it cool down by simply not attacking or switching back to neutral yourself. In addition to your normal attacks, you'll build up special points, or SP for short, which will allow you to activate super moves known as combat arts. There's over 90 of these in the game, with arts for melee attacks, ranged attacks, dash attacks, and guarding. These are affected by the elemental mode you're currently in, as well as having 3 different tiers of power. Even in the endgame, you won't be able to have all these active at the same time. Often the choice comes down to whether you want a powerful attack against a single target, or something that hits a lot of foes at once. Each has its own style and uses, and you'll soon find your own setup that you prefer. Regardless of what you choose, they're great to look at, especially when you finally get access to those top tier arts. But Leia won't need to fight alone. As time goes on, she'll befriend a number of other players and be able to form a party with them. They won't be able to help on every quest, nor inside of dungeons, but when in the overworld, they'll be able to help you take down enemies more quickly and more easily, and often banter not only with Leia, but with each other as well. Although most of your journeys with them are optional, they add a lot more life and flavor to the game, and develop pretty well as characters all their own along the journey. It's also fun to watch as they, like Leia, will level up and gain new equipment as the game continues. Beyond that, when not in combat, you can even have Leia contact them just to chat for a bit. Well, they chat, she tends to mostly just listen. And on one final note about combat, it's important to mention chains. As you fight enemies in rapid succession without stopping, you'll see both the quantity and quality of enemy drops rise. Since you'll need plenty of crafting materials in order to make the game's best equipment, this helps immensely to cut down the amount of time you would otherwise spend grinding. But you do need to be careful. If you're defeated in the middle of a chain, you'll lose all of the items and experience you gathered during it. But boy is it satisfying when you finish a long chain and get multiple level ups all in one go. But you'll need more than just drops from enemies in order to get crafting going. Every area in the game also has a number of lore about it that you can attack to get different drops as well. As you collect more drops, you'll get more information on the plants in question. Filling out all these in your in-game encyclopedia is actually an ongoing side quest that spans the entire game, culminating in some pretty awesome rewards in addition to all the drops you'll get along the way. And speaking of side quests, there are a ton of them. Some are just straightforward fetch quests, but you'll soon find there's a lot more than just that as time goes on. If you want to complete everything that the game has to offer, you'll have to dash through an icy obstacle course while being shot at by invincible turrets, play ice hockey with an ancient brewery to produce fine wine, and even play a few rounds of tower defense, just to name a few of the many tasks within the game. Each offers gold and experience to help you level up, and sometimes they'll even include unique equipment. And there's even a handful of side quests that form their own subplots as they persist through multiple parts of the game. And I hope you like puzzles, because this game has plenty of them. Most involve a mixture of ricochets from your VRPs, as well as using elements and various stage gimmicks to navigate the game's dungeons. There are a handful of box puzzles, but rest assured, these are used very sparingly. The puzzles start out fairly simple, mostly just a case of finding the right angle to direct your spears, but become much more varied and involved as the game progresses. Many of the later puzzles are timing dependent, requiring you to both figure out how to get through them and requiring you to get the motions right as well. Sokoban, this is not. And it's not just the dungeons that have puzzles. Leia is able to jump around the environment in a fashion very similar to the 3D Zelda titles. Simply run off an edge and she'll jump from it automatically. There are a number of small ledges in the game which you can use to ascend to greater heights. The game uses this to constantly create these platforming mazes. You'll often see treasure chests hidden just out of your reach, encouraging you to explore and find out how to finally obtain the elusive prize seen above. As you can probably already tell by this point, there's a lot to keep track of in CrossCode. Luckily, there's a very robust in-game journal, which not only serves to remind you of what's going on within the plot, but also details all the enemies and plants you've discovered, where to find them, what drops you've seen them give, all the traders as well as the items they make and the materials they need for them, all the special status buffs and debuffs that your equipment gives, and it also includes a map that can be used anytime you're outside of combat to teleport to any landmark that you've previously visited. And now we come to the plot. I've had spoiler warnings in the past, but this time I implore you, if you've not played this game yet and you have any intention of doing so, please do not ruin it for yourself. If you wish to avoid spoilers, please skip ahead to the time coordinates indicated on screen. Initiate temporal distortion now. Still with me? Then don't say I didn't warn you, because I most certainly did. CrossCode starts off with a brief sequence where you play not as Leia, but as a woman named Shizuka, logging into Crossworlds and fighting her way through high-level enemies. When she reaches the end of the path, her brother Satoshi is there. Not just there in the game, but actually there on Raritan Gem, hidden away in a lab. He completes an unknown project with his dying breath, while his sister can only watch through her avatar as the life fades from his eyes. We then transition to the game proper as Leia is awakened by Sergei, bringing her aboard the MS Solar. Sergei and Carla, an employee of the ship, begin to teach her how to navigate the game world around her, while explaining what they can. As mentioned before, CrossWorlds is not merely virtual, but actually built into the world of Raritan Gem like a theme park. The Solar isn't part of said game world. Those on board are part of the maintenance crew that keeps the game running smoothly. Leia has lost her memory, and they hope by returning her to a game she's familiar with, they can jog it and get it going once more. Before long, Sergei does manage to find a small workaround for Leia's speech issue, hard-coding her first word, hi. But before they have a chance to reach the shore, the ship is attacked by a mysterious player that seems to have broken out of the confines of the official game area, referred to as the playground by the crew. He quickly takes an interest in Leia, tossing her atop the cargo crates and forcing her to fight a giant enemy crab. After she takes on this challenge, the ship's captain, Jet, interrupts the fight by unleashing actual weapons on the blue avatar.
Hey guys.
I promise I will only make that joke once. Instant matter is great for making a game world, but not so much use against real firepower. So Leia uses this distraction to get back below decks to the area where Sergei materialized her in. However, instant matter also regenerates very quickly, so the mysterious player gives chase. Once back in the cargo hold, Sergei creates a teleporter to get Leia into Crossworlds proper, escaping the strange avatar's clutches. Leia then finds herself in the Crossworlds tutorial, where she quite literally bumps into her first friend, Emil. Emil quickly challenges Leia to a race through the tutorial's final stretch, a mini dungeon meant to get players acquainted with the game. Emil manages to beat Leia, though it's a close call. However, as Leia exits the dungeon, another player named Apollo notices something strange. Because Leia gained experience for defeating the giant enemy crab, Leia is now at level 4, whereas the tutorial is supposed to bring players up to level 3. Thus, he accuses Leia of cheating. Luckily, before he can make too much of a scene, Apollo's friend steps in and dissuades him from pursuing the issue. As Leia didn't enter the game through official means, both she and Sergei share a sigh of relief, fearful that she'll be banned if anybody realizes she's not supposed to be there. Leia and Emil then proceed to Rookie Harbor. Emil's friend, Lucas, gives the two a tour of the town, but he's much too high level to fight alongside them at the moment. It's here that Crossworlds first opens up to Leia with a central hub full of shops and quests, as well as the start of Crossworlds' main quest, Operation Trackwalker. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on Operation Trackwalker, nor the details of Crossworlds' plot. Crossworlds' story is not the focus of CrossCode. It is but a means to an end. It's much like 1001 Arabian Nights. Alibaba, Sinbad, and Aladdin are not meant to be the focus here. They are but mediums to tell Scheherazad's story, to relay her plight and how she escapes it to the readers. And similarly, Crossworlds is not meant to be the player's focus here. It simply serves as a background to showcase Leia's story. Despite this, know that the game does do a lot to detail the fiction within a fiction's lore, detailing the planet of Shadoon and its mythos. I leave that to you to explore. At this point, the story is mostly about character building as Leia meets new friends and strengthens her bonds with them. In addition to adventuring alongside Emil, Leia also forms a rivalry of sorts with Apollo, who challenges her to a series of PvP duels as they progress along their journey. And I just can't help but imagine that every word out of this guy's mouth is spoken like a Yu-Gi-Oh character on caffeine. Yes, you are indeed a worthy opponent. From there, the pair join the First Scholars, a guild which Lucas is a part of. They then overcome the first dungeon and claim the first element, and a third adventurer joins their merry band, Trani. Trani seems to be a biologist by trade and loves to shatter the suspension of disbelief as he constantly points out the lack of realism in the game world around them. At various points through her journeys, Leia has dreams. Sometimes about the events she's seen with her friends, other times shards of her past that she recalls from before playing the game. They come and go as they log in and out, but as time goes on, Leia begins to be bothered as she realizes that something's wrong. She logs out of the game, she dreams, but she never seems to have any life outside of Crossworlds. Sergei reluctantly reveals to Leia that she's actually in a coma, suffering from head trauma and unable to wake up. But they're able to get her consciousness inside of the game. He assures her that she's stable, but they hope by stimulating her mind and its memories, she might be able to return to the waking world. From that point, Leia continues to play Crossworlds as her friendships continue to grow. She duels Apollo again, traverses another dungeon, and gains access to the ice element. Leia, Emil, and Trani then join a raid alongside the rest of the First Scholars, divided into a low-level team consisting of the 3 of them, and a high-level team that has the others adventuring alongside a parallel track, working together as enemy levels are scaled to match. However, just as the group is about to approach the raid boss, Sergei notices something odd is happening. But before he can react, Leia finds herself teleported far away. The Spiromancer finds herself on a cliff, far removed from any other landmass. Sergei is able to remain in contact with Leia and warns her that teleportation and communications with other players have both been disabled. The culprit then makes himself known, the mysterious blue avatar from earlier. He begins to fight Leia, seeming more to want to test her than anything else. Sergei tells her to play along as he comes up with a solution. Unfortunately, the mysterious avatar is expecting Sergei's tricks this time, blocking Leia's escape and ending his twisted game. And this is where the plot really starts to get rolling. If you've not yet played CrossCode, I'd like to take one last attempt to urge you to skip ahead. Here's that timestamp again if you need it. If you're sure you're ready to continue, then let's begin. Leia awakens in a familiar room that she recognizes from her dreams. Luckily, she still has Sergei with her, but before she has a chance to fully take her situation in, a man steps into the room and speaks as though he knows Leia. After he leaves, Sergei explains that the other man is named Gotham, a former colleague of his that he's not seen in a very long time. Following Gotham's instructions, Leia soon bumps into Lucas. They're made to travel together through this strange land after being given the most bare bones of quests using what sounds like filler text. They carry out their assigned task, which leads them to an office building, of all things. They return to the quest hub and Lucas decides to log out for the day, only to find out that he's unable to. He attempts to simply remove the VR headset, yet finds he's unable to even feel it. He quickly goes outside and questions the other players, finding that all of them are stuck in the game world as well. In a fit of madness, Lucas attacks one of the mechanical guards and finds himself quickly killed. Luckily, he respawns as usual for Crossworlds. After thinking on matters a little longer, Lucas comes to another horrifying realization. He's unable to even remember what life is like outside of the game. The two return to their cells at that point. Rather nice for a prison, but still a prison nonetheless. Sergei then explains what he's been able to find out. Leia is trapped in a part of Crossworlds that was never completed, known as the Vermilion Wastelands. He reveals that he's an employee for Instatainment, the company that owns Crossworlds and the patent on instant matter. And he has access to some internal documents, though as far as he knew, the Vermilion Wastelands were abandoned. Sergei is about to share something else with Leia, but then decides against it at the last moment, letting her get some rest for the night instead. What follows is a dream where Leia remembers things more vividly than ever, seeing 3 men talking around a table, one of which she recognizes as none other than Sergei. The others are Gotham and another man that Sergei soon explains is Satoshi, whom he decides it's finally time to reveal is none other than Leia's brother. Sergei tells her that the 3 of them all used to work for Instatainment about 5 years ago, but he's been out of contact with both of them ever since. Still, there's nothing that can be done about it at the moment, so Lucas decides to give Leia a tour of the dreary waste as they simply wait for their next assignment. They try to keep their spirits up even in this terrifying situation, with Lucas even commenting about how Trani would probably be complaining that the cliff formations make no geological sense. Leia goes back to sleep and has another dream. When she wakes up, the door suddenly locks. She hears the sounds of fighting outside of her door, and then the dam bursts. Shizuka suddenly shows up, burning with fury. She clearly recognizes Leia and is surprised by her ability to speak, even if only in limited fashion. Only her hatred and anger are clear. She claims to know the truth about who Leia is, and though he knows Shizuka can't hear him, Sergei begs her not to say anything. Without any time for Leia to prepare herself for the truth, Shizuka makes it clear. Leia is an artificial intelligence built by copying Shizuka's mind and memories, and thus has no way of ever existing outside of Crossworlds. Shizuka then punches Leia around as she can only shiver in shock and horror before eventually leaving Leia to her tears. Leia curls up as she remembers being connected to a massive computer, while Sergei desperately tries to snap her out of it, begging her to hold on, trying to convince her Shizuka was lying and claiming she's his only lead. Hurt and betrayed, Leia keeps repeating one word until Sergei leaves. Bye. I'll get to the complexities of Leia being an AI in a little bit. It's not the right time for that discussion quite yet. However, this scene is what cemented CrossCode as one of only 3 games to make me cry, alongside Baten Kaitos Origins and Live Alive. Confused, alone, and with nowhere to go, Leia stumbles forward until she sees Lucas. Gone is the ever-joyful and optimistic girl he knows, Leia simply staring blankly ahead, only occasionally nodding weakly in response. There's no music for this portion of the game, not even the eerie, discordant theme of the Wastelands. Just the sounds of battle as Lucas tries to reach through to Leia. Not knowing of what she's learned, he assures her that they'll find a way out of the game, and she can't help but burst into tears again. Lucas then hugs Leia to comfort her, and it transitions to a scene where the two simply talk. I really don't have time to give this scene the attention it deserves, but it does a really good job of showing Lucas attempting to help Leia express her pain as best she can, despite her lack of verbal communication. And it really feeds back into what I was saying earlier about Leia's facial expressions. After their talk, they call it a day. Sergei tries to apologize to Leia, but she's not in the mood to hear any of it. The next day, the pair finish up the quest they began, which leads them into a disheveled bedroom. After a few moments, Lucas comes to the realization that it's his own room, and Leia scolds him as best she can about the messy state of it. The two have another good talk, and Lucas gets a little closer to the truth of the matter. After that, the two are ordered to the mysterious tower that watches over the wasteland, which, of course, no one ever returns from. Once they enter, they find themselves separated via an instanced dungeon. But Sergei contacts Leia, assuring her that he's finally come up with a plan. After some comedic mishaps, Sergei manages to allow Leia to shatter through the instant matter beneath her and transition into another instance of the dungeon. After repeating the process a few times more, Leia finds herself in what seems to be an empty room, but turns out to be a torture chamber of some sort. The blue avatar finds Leia, and he and his minions give chase as Sergei continues to help her traverse from instance to instance. Unfortunately, the blue avatar eventually realizes where she's headed and cuts her off. He then creates a massive snail boss for Leia to fight. What is it with this guy and giant shelled creatures? Regardless, after Leia battles it for a few moments, Sergei informs her that the snail's HP is off the charts. He can't even say the number. For you incremental fans, it's 160 quintillion. Nevertheless, Sergei manages to hack the game again, allowing Leia to gain attack buffs each time she attacks one of the smaller slugs, eventually allowing her to fight on a level playing field. And the blue avatar is strangely okay with this. More than okay, even excited by the prospect. After defeating the boss monster, Leia finally manages to meet up with Lucas, Sergei allowing both of them to tear through the next wall and leave via an elevator which isn't even part of Crossworlds, finding themselves outside at a dock of some sorts. But just as it seems like they're in the clear, Lucas is frozen in place and cannot move. The blue avatar shows up once more and demands their surrender, but Lucas tells Leia to leave him behind and run. At his and Sergei's urging, she makes a dash for it, only to be trapped once again. Just as all seems hopeless, Captain Jet shows up at the last minute and, once again, proves that instant matter is no match for real weaponry. He swoops Leia up and carries her back to the MS Solar. It's at this point Sergei comes clean, apologizing and telling Leia everything he knows. For real this time. He confirms that Shizuka was telling the truth and Leia is indeed an AI. More specifically, an artificial intelligence created from the consciousness of a human player, dubbed an Evotar. Because CrossWorlds is a VR MMO that directly interacts with a player's mind to simulate all senses, Satoshi found that he was able to actually analyze the player's thoughts, a project he called CrossCode. Using this analysis, he could virtually reconstruct a player's entire mind, effectively creating a copy of their consciousness. However, Sergei also explains that most Evotars go mad and suffer a mental breakdown when they discover they are not in fact the source of their own memories, but rather machine copies of them, hence why he hid the truth from her. However, as far as Sergei knew, Project CrossCode was never made into a reality. The last he saw Satoshi, Shizuka, and Gotham, they pitched the idea to their higher-ups, But being a game company, they saw no use in such esoteric processes and shot it down before it even began. The three of them left Instatainment after finding someone else that was interested in the project. They asked Sergey to come with him, but he declined and stayed as a programmer for Instatainment instead. He then fell out of contact with the trio and hadn't heard from them for years, until he discovered Leia hidden within the code to Crossworlds. Leia returns to the game proper after that, and just when you thought her troubles were finally over, Emil immediately contacts her and demands to know what happened, why she left the raid suddenly, and why she's been online but unable to contact the rest of the guild recently. The Pentafist attempts to grill Leia with a number of questions, but much to her relief, they're interrupted by none other than Lucas. Leia runs over to hug him, only for him to be completely confused as to what's going on. She runs outside and sits under a tree to cry. Sergey explains that the Lucas she saw in the Wastes, and all the other players there, were likely Evotars like herself. Unable to face either of them, Leia decides to simply continue with the game in hopes of finding more answers. This brings her to Gaia's Garden, an especially huge area with no less than 3 dungeons. As soon as she enters therein, who would show up but Apollo, eager for another duel now that they both have access to heat and cold elements. As usual, he won't take no for an answer. After the fight, Apollo's friend from earlier, Jorn, is a bit more observant and notices that Leia isn't quite alright. He asks if she'd like to party up with them instead of exploring the jungle alone, which she agrees to, playing with them for the day. After another dream, Sergey and Leia deduce that her memories are pointing to Sapphire Ridge, a late-game area with a Japanese-inspired aesthetic. Though she can't access it yet, at least she now knows where they need to go. Trotty then contacts Leia and asks her to meet him outside the entrance to the dungeons, where, you guessed it, he's also invited Emil. Trotty works to patch things up between the two of them, they have a tearful reunion, and Leia hugs each of them in turn. From here, the game returns to focusing primarily on character development, as you no longer are locked into partying with Emil and Trotty. You can freely invite either or both of them, as well as Apollo or Jorn. This really goes back to what I said earlier about how well the characters are written. Whichever pair you choose will not only have their own dialogues with Leia, but also interactions with one another, making it a treat to explore areas with a new combination. Regardless, all 5 of them manage to reach the endgame content as they overcome not only the dungeons within Gaia's Garden, but also a series of trials in Sapphire Ridge, allowing Leia to finally access the northern reaches of the area, where she finds a cavern that she recognizes from her dreams. After interacting with the environment in very specific ways, a teleporter opens up, bringing Leia to the same path that Shizuka traveled at the very beginning of the game. And who else would be at the end of that path other than Shizuka herself? She bars Leia's way, forcing her into a PvP duel. But even when Shizuka's defeated, she won't let it go, immediately forcing Leia into a second duel. Before I can proceed too far, someone interrupts things and contacts Shizuka, convincing her to let Leia pass. At long last, Satoshi is there, waiting for Leia and Sergey, and begins to finally explain everything. After Satoshi and the others left Instatainment, a mysterious investor named Mr. Sidwell reached out to them about their ideas. He provided funding, equipment, and even a place hidden within the playground for them to test their theories. Before long, Leia was born, but that's when their angel investor turned out to be a devil. Sidwell's true intent behind funding Project CrossCode was espionage. After letting the Evotars spend a bit of time to recover their memories, they would then be brought into the tower to be interrogated, and since they were virtual constructs, they could be tormented in ways that no human would ever survive, forcing even the most stalwart of minds to give up whatever information was sought. And since the actual players were never harmed, no one outside their little circle would ever know it was happening. When Satoshi and the others wanted out of this madness, Sidwell blackmailed them into remaining. All their dealings under the nose of Instatainment and using their technologies without authorization was highly illegal in and of itself. It's at this point that Satoshi reveals that he is not the man that Sergey once knew, but rather another Evotar. The true Satoshi, the original, died 2 years ago. He created an Evotar of himself, offering it to Sidwell in exchange for the promise that Shizuka would be able to leave freely. Of course, Sidwell never lived up to his end of the bargain. He then begins to explain that because of the machinations of the original Satoshi, Leia might be their chance to finally escape, partly because her data is kept on a separate server from all the other Evotars. By faking a malfunction within Leia, he convinced Sidwell to give her access to the central server so that he could attempt to debug her. He then made it seem like she was irreparable, camouflaging her under a bug that he knew only Sergey would be able to fix. Satoshi and Sergei then begin to speak in private about technical matters of the plan, suggesting that Leia and Shizuka hash things out. Without fists this time. The two sit by the lakeside and talk for a while, and eventually Shizuka finally comes to the realization that she's been blaming Leia for all her problems, even though Leia's just as much a victim in all this as she is. Leia pats her on the shoulder and tries to console her, but Shizuka quickly stops her, complaining, "That is nothing like me." As simple as they are, those 5 words are my favorite in the entire game. So often these days, sci-fi has just become fantasy with a futuristic theme.
Totally illogical. There was no chance.
Which isn't to say I don't like Star Wars or StarCraft or similar stories, I very much do. But they are more fantasy than true sci-fi. What makes the writing in CrossCode so great is that it takes these overused ideas. Being trapped in virtual reality, sentient AIs, a silent protagonist, and truly takes the time to explore them to their logical conclusions. It reminds me a great deal of Frankenstein. The novel properly asks, what if? And unlike the films that have loosely adapted it, it focuses on the consequences of creating life in the laboratory, on both Victor and the monster's internal struggles, on the logical and moral ramifications thereof. And likewise, CrossCode goes the extra mile to put it in this same category. What are the consequences of connecting your senses directly to a machine? What would happen if you had artificial intelligence that was truly able to think for itself? What if 2 different people had the same set of memories, but each was allowed to forge their own path? Trying to explore these ideas as best we can through literature is what truly great science fiction is all about. Final preparations then begin, and Shizuka gives them one last revelation. Gotham is the player behind the blue avatar. Trani reveals that he's going to be leaving for a while, and after that, there's several hints that drive the player towards the true ending as one of the first scholars, Albert, is in the Endgame area, Rhombus Square. If Leia goes to meet him there, they'll also run into Ivan, a major shareholder in Instantainment that enjoys seeing their work firsthand in his spare time. And apparently an Iroh fan. But let's face it, who isn't an Iroh fan? Through a series of conversations, Sergei and Leia manage to convince Albert and then Ivan that Leia is in fact a sentient AI. With that, the plan to rescue the Evotars goes into motion, with Sergei and Leia revealing the truth of everything to the first scholars, as well as Apollo and Jorn. Sergei explains that they have a plan to overload the Evotar server, causing it to crash, and thus rendering Sidwell unable to wipe the data before Leia can use her access key to unlock it. The group storms the Vermilion Wasteland, all while inflicting a status ailment on the Evotars that puts a heavy strain on the server, effectively causing a DDoS. Eventually, they manage to crash the server, but Sidwell appears and points out that the server is held within a dungeon instance, so he can clear the environment server and remove any avatar, including Leia, from the room at any time. However, Gotham returns, pointing out that it's not Sidwell, but himself that has control over the environment server, and he's crafted one final challenge for Leia. If she agrees to take it on, he promises that nothing will happen to the Evotar server. So Leia enters the Vermilion Tower in order to take on one final dungeon. And a massive dungeon it is, with new puzzles, a handful of mini-bosses, a single massive puzzle which even Sergei can't help but remark on the ludicrousy of, all culminating in a battle against Gotham once more. First they resume their fight from earlier, followed up by a massive beast inspired by Hindu mythology. It's a long and drawn out battle, but eventually Leia manages to overcome him. Much to Sergei's surprise, Gotham is actually right there inside the dungeon. He removes the VR equipment and begins to step out to congratulate Leia, even as the instant matter floor beneath him can scarcely hold his weight. With everything that he's done up to this point, Gotham finds that he can't forgive himself, telling Leia and Sergei goodbye. Leia attempts to stop him as he advances towards the edge of the platform, but again, instant matter can't stand up against actual flesh, and Gotham simply tosses her aside before flinging himself into the pit below. With a heavy heart, Leia and Sergei confront Sidwell within the server room at long last. As promised, Gotham ensured that he'd be locked out of the server. Sidwell does seem to show a bit of remorse about Gotham's death, but it's not enough to convince him to turn himself in. With only Leia's avatar there, there's no way to stop him from leaving. But while Sidwell does manage to escape, they do achieve their goal of accessing the server and saving all the Evotars from his clutches. From there, we have a long sequence of Leia simply enjoying the game with her friends over the course of a long day. Sergei narrates as the scene shows everyone simply enjoying each other's company, knowing they won't be seeing Leia for a while as Sergei doesn't want to be hacking her into the game, while at the same time trying to convince his superiors to let Evotars use the playground as their home. Eventually, she gives everyone hugs before logging out one last time. After a lengthy credits sequence, we see Trani standing over the Vermilion Wasteland, overlooking the same point where Leia and Evotar Lucas had their talk, noting that Lucas was right. The cliffs don't make any sense. Then there's one final scene, with the first scholars all gathered together. Sergei contacts them all, and depending on whether or not Leia met with Ivan, he explains either that Infotainment will be banning all the Evotars, or that they've approved the plans to let them live within the playground, with Leia being able to see her friends again in the near future. Welcome back, Chrononauts. You're just in time to join us for the conclusion. That was quite the plot summary. If this review goes on any longer, people might start mistaking me for Exoparadigm Gamer. To recap, CrossCode is a wonder to play through. It's a massive adventure that took me about 60 hours my first time through, and about 40 when replaying it for this review. There is so much to this game, from the amazing story of the main quest, to the wonderfully detailed supporting cast, to the numerous and varied side quests. It takes tired and overused concepts and finally gives them the treatment that they've long deserved. Playing on old tropes of JRPGs and science fiction alike, and really taking a good hard look at them. Forgive the cliche, but I laughed, I cried, I went home happy. And the gameplay was every bit as good as the story, with an amazingly fluid battle system and painstakingly detailed sprite work that's an absolute splendor to look at. I find that CrossCode is one of the finest pieces of art that I have had the opportunity to experience, worthy of no less than an astounding 10 out of 10. So, does that mean this game is perfect? Of course not. I strongly believe that no piece of art is above reproach, and CrossCode is no exception to this rule. And of course, no game is going to be right for everybody. However, it is in the top echelon, the creme a la creme of those that I've had the honor of playing. There are few games that I replay once I get past the 30-hour mark, but I would be surprised if I did not come back to CrossCode at some point in the future. But Leia's adventures don't end there. Radical Fish Games just released the CrossCode A New Home expansion pack. I wish I could have had this review out before that was released, but regardless, I will be taking a look at this one in the near future. CrossCode is available for PC via Steam or GOG, on the Nintendo Switch, and on the Sony PlayStation 4. If you're interested in purchasing or learning more, links are included in the description. But what about you? What do you think of CrossCode? What games do you find worthy of a 10? If you have any questions, remarks, or opposing points of view, leave them in the comments down below, and please remember to like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell. Until next time, farewell, fellow fanatics. Thank you again for watching. I have plenty more to share with you if you're interested. You can click up here above my head to subscribe to my channel. You can click over here on my monitor to see the most recent video that I've worked on. Or if you prefer, you can click up here to open this mysterious vault and see what video that the YouTube algorithm has picked just for you.